Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and author of the best-selling biblical thriller, The Codist. Now out in second edition. You can get it on a special price on Amazon, $2.99 for Kindle. If you want to know what your DNA is doing out there on 23andMe land, in those databases that are being hacked and sold all over the world, well, that's not like real personal information, except it is to Satan, who has grabbed a hold of this because there is a Y chromosome marker for those who are in the line of Aaron. And it will be, as Matthew 23:37-39 says, that Jesus isn't coming back until the Jews in Jerusalem call for his return. If he can cut off the line of Aaron, then he can cut off the return of the Messiah. Got to get it. Top rated, The Codist, $2.99 on Kindle. I want to encourage you to also visit our website, ignitingnation.com, and scroll on special offers. You will see the cover of my latest book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. Click on the book. We're going to ask for your email address. We won't send you spam because spam is not kosher, but we will send you the first chapter of this book. It takes you on a journey from the natural to the supernatural as God reveals supernatural truths from the ground all the way out to the fruit of the Tree of Life. A must-read and one that's being used around the world, including just released last month in Indonesia. So get your copy today. It's great to catch up with an old friend of mine, Caroline Mendez, author of Threads of Wisdom, Real World Journeys to Leadership of Christian Women, Marketplace Leaders, and their best advice for glorifying God in your calling. She is a disciple of Jesus Christ, wife, mother, businesswoman, and champion for Christian women in leadership. She spent 21 years in corporate America, starting in the mailroom and working her way up to executive management positions in the high-tech industry. For the past 18 years, she has joyfully coached women in their lives and business, challenging and stretching them to be fully who Messiah has created them to be. Caroline's gifting is challenging Christian women leaders to live their vision. She holds certifications as a professional certified coach, certified gospel coach, and certified coach facilitator. She is most passionate about women's biblical equality and her current calling to empower Christian women and working women with the newly discovered 9 attributes of Christian women leaders. Caroline Mendez, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you, Rabbi.
So good to see you again.
So good to see you after 20 years.
20 years. It's hard to imagine that 20 years ago we must have been sitting at my house.
Yep.
And what were we talking about the last discussion that we had? I had come to faith.
I'm going to embarrass you. Am I going to embarrass you if I say that?
What's that?
Actually, we were talking about you were doing stand-up comedy.
Yes.
You actually had showed me a video of you doing stand-up comedy.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. You know, a lot of people don't know that my history. They know about my time with AT&T and with Hewlett Packard and my journey to faith in 1996. But yes, there was a period of time. All my students in the 4 churches that I'm in every week know just a snippet of that part of my life. But that's funny that you would remember that. But I do remember that when I accepted the Lord, that you shared your own experience, and I'd like you to share that experience and that journey, because we both came out of a journey looking for truth. We found it, what we thought was in the New Age, and
Yep.
You know, I was on a 4-year exploration for the truth, and thought I had found it. And it's kind of a testimony to people will submit to the strongest spirit in the room, whether or not it's authentic or it's not authentic. It doesn't really matter. And I'm a strong person, as you know, dynamic and outspoken. And I was as passionate about that as Paul was about Pharisaic Judaism. And I had the same kind of Damascus Road experience that he had. But tell us about your journey.
Well, it started in 2005. I had had the best year ever professionally. I I was making six figures. I was thrilled about that. Personally, my life was a shambles. My marriage hit a very bad low spot. If you can believe it, our 5-year-old son was actually failing kindergarten in public school. And I was just a mess. I tried everything, Eric. I tried every new age tactic I could to solve the problems with our son, to solve the problems in our marriage. And I was coming up empty. And so in the spring of 2006, a friend of mine invited me to church, to Easter service. And the night before, I had the strangest urge to watch Passion of the Christ, the movie. And I watched it and I sobbed the entire way through it. Well, of course, the next day in Easter service, while I was watching the stage, what were they playing but clips of Passion of the Christ? And I knew that God was speaking to me. And my friend was sitting to my right. Eddie and Evan were sitting, that's my husband and son, were sitting to my left. And she knew the instant I said to God, my life stinks, I'm done, you take it if you want it so badly. And he did in that moment. And like you probably, Eric, and every other believer, the most amazing feeling of peace came over me. It had been as if I were searching my whole life for that. And so that's how it started, was in an Easter pew service on Easter morning in 2006. And so since then, I've given my life to Christ.
Well, you know, it's interesting that I tell people everybody has the same spiritual birth date.
Yes.
They say, well, how is that possible? There's 365 days in a year. How is it possible for everybody to have the same spiritual birth date? And I say, because you came to faith the day you were ready, just like all of us. And so I remember that day in December of 1996 when I had been prodded by so many of my Christian friends to go to church, and I would say, I'm Jewish. And they would say, I'm sorry. And I would say, you're sorry? What is it you're sorry about? Well, we don't want to offend you. We love you. We love you. And I've come to find out they love me, but they were loving me to death.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so that's amazing. So you went on this journey. You came to faith. Were you immediately shepherded, mentored? Where did you?
I was. Thankfully, at the church I was going to, I immediately went into a class called Wisdom for Wives, which, by the way, I was not very excited about. And from there, I went into a discipleship group. And so I stopped working for 4 years, and the Lord said, I want you to serve whoever I bring you. And so I would watch people's children, I would cook meals, and that went on for 4 years until I couldn't take it anymore, because you know me, I love to work. And so one day in prayer, I begged the Lord, I said, please give me work. Please give me something to do that would marry my faith and my love and passion for women and working women. And so he brought me to an organization doing Christian CEO roundtables. And I started to do Christian women CEO roundtables. But as I searched in 2010 for Christian businesswomen organizations or women who were visible in the marketplace, there were none. The only two that kept showing up were Joyce Meyer and Beth Moore. And I thought, okay, well, they're wonderful biblical leaders, but they're not professional business women in the marketplace. And so I started to question that part of me. Every Bible study I went to would speak to who I am as a wife and mother and a woman, right? A Proverbs 31 woman. Yet no one knew what to do, or they didn't speak to the professional side of me, which really until I had been born again was 75% of who I was as an individual. And so that's when really the search began.
You know, it's really quite fascinating that you talk about that. Marketplace ministry, Christian women leaders, is maybe of all the 1,000 episodes we've done here on Revealing the Truth, we've not interviewed anyone who has ever addressed this topic of women in business,
Right.
marketplace ministry, and women business leaders. we have many who are trying to break the yoke of the oppression of women in ministry,
Yes.
and how the New Testament has been misapplied and mistranslated into the role. As a matter of fact, the first revival that ever took place took place by a woman at a well and
In,
an encounter with Jesus. And she went back, and revival broke out for the Samaritan woman.
yeah.
And she was the one that brought revival to her hometown.
Amen.
And they came to faith. So,
Amen.
you know, the fact that a woman and all these things that we have tried from a doctrinal, theological approach to put a muzzle on women is contrary
It
to
is.
what the examples in the Bible of the Deborahs, of the Yaels, of the Samaritan woman, of Mary and I was just in Magdala 5 days ago. So
Mm.
I know that this is something that is critical, and our audience is a global audience. So right now, we're being watched in Greece, we're being watched in
Mm.
really almost every nation in the world that allows the internet, unfiltered internet access. Uh, this is a problem that's global, as
Yes.
women are now, with the exception in the Muslim nations, which we're in Pakistan and we're in many of the Muslim countries, we get a tremendous amount of feedback. This applies to all Christian women,
Yes.
all Christian working women,
Yes.
in their role of rising up to a leadership position and becoming a model of Messiah in the workplace.
Yes.
This is not a male-oriented, male-only calling.
No, it's not.
And
But
unfortunately,
apparently, Eric, what's so odd about this is why, when I began the journey to look and I couldn't find any community and I couldn't find anyone who was talking about it, nor could I find a model of Christian business women leadership. And I think that's why the Lord led me to write the book. And so I interviewed 10 Christian women leaders in the marketplace, people like Cheryl Batchelder, who was the previous CEO of Popeyes. And I interviewed them about their journey. How did they get to where they were going? And then I asked them each to answer questions that I thought women like myself, who were looking for a Christian businesswoman role model, would want to hear the answer to. How did you get to where you are? How do you integrate your work and faith? What's the best advice you have for Christian women in the marketplace? If you were to give them advice, and what would you have liked to have known at the beginning of your journey? And then I compiled all that into a book. And what's so interesting, Eric, is that what happened was, after I read those 10 chapters of each of these 10 women, it occurred to me that there were threads, hence the name of the book. There are threads that each one of these women seemed to have in common. And those came to be the 9 attributes of Christian women leaders.
you know, it's so interesting that you and I both came out of high tech, and the high tech prayer breakfast that took place in Atlanta
Yes.
was always teeming with as many women as there were men. It was one of the places that I learned a great deal, learned a lot while I was in the staffing business there in Atlanta. And I remember the first time I gave my testimony was at the Full Gospel Businessmen's Luncheon.
Yep. So
So it was just men.
right.
Okay? Very first time I was ever asked to give my testimony, I believe it was around 1999, 98, 99, somewhere in that time frame. And it didn't even occur to me that, well, is there a Christian businesswoman's luncheon? Is there a Christian businesswoman's association? It's not something you would think about, but now that I look back and you're saying these things, I'm remembering how exclusive a group, how tightly knit this male-dominated population.
Yes.
I remember working for companies that were faith-based companies in the staffing industry, and spent 8 years with one in particular, but there was never an emphasis on a woman's role in business ministry or marketplace ministry and setting that tone. So this fills a great void for those that want to be in the workforce. You know, they feel that calling that Paul gave us this ministry of reconciliation, 2 Corinthians 5:17 through 6:10. But women are not they're not resourced.
They're not
the way they need to be,
like men are. And you know what's so interesting, Eric, is that I found in my 12 years of being a Christian that I was not affirmed by the church that I was attending, that I was a leader, nor that they never recognized or acknowledged that part of me. And I finally left that church and am now at another one that I started in January. And it's so refreshing to hear them say, brothers and sisters. And there are women in leadership in this church, and they're acknowledged, and they see and understand the equality of man. You know, God created man and woman. Why would he give women leadership skills if they weren't meant to have them? Why would he create women differently than men, but equally, so that they could serve? The beauty, I think, of our Lord is that male and female together make something better than anything that we could do separately. And women have a very unique leadership style like men do. But we have been taught, or for those of us who grew up in corporate, it seemed like the only people we had to emulate were men.
Right.
And so women would take on this mantle of being a male-like leader, and it's uncomfortable. And I was rough. I was rough in corporate. I'm sure you remember me, but I thought that I was supposed to be that way as a leader, aggressive and, you know, kind of dictatorial. But these women that I interviewed in these 9 attributes are kind of the antithesis of that. Their style, and it's not so much what they do, Eric, as much as it is who are they being as a Christian woman in the marketplace and as a leader. Who are they, and what does that look like?
It's fascinating as you're talking about this. Before you and I came to faith, we thought nothing of climbing the corporate ladder on the backs of those who were subordinate to us or even above us as we climb that rung. And this softening that has taken place, this you know, I'm still like every other Jewish person and every Israeli referred to as sabras, which in Hebrew means cactus, prickly on the outside but soft and mushy on the inside. And this is you know, salt and light. Salt and light is really that kind of balance that you have to find in order to do things from a standpoint of compassion, understanding, encouragement, and uplifting.
Amen.
The methodology that you used for this book was kind of stunning to me as to how you approached it. You used a very corporate approach to using and creating a methodology that you implemented, and you implemented it uniformly across 10 very specific interviews, from someone who had 4 employees to someone who had thousands of employees. And what you found in this, and you're going to share this with us, from talking about first the methodology that you used, how you established the questions, and how your approach was. The first thing I want to hear from you, though, is when you contacted Shannon Miles and Eleanor Morgan and Beth Bragg Hannon and Janet Black and Cheryl Batchelor, how did they react to the invitation to be interviewed by you?
Well, what's so beautiful about what the Lord did was most of these women I had in a CEO executive roundtable. So I knew them over a couple of years. Cheryl Batchelor I didn't, but the Lord, I love this story. I was at a conference, Cheryl Batchelor was speaking, and I knew that she was one of the women that I was supposed to interview. But I said, you know what, Lord, I'm not sure. If you want me to put her in the book, if this is your leading, then give me an opening. So I walk into the room, she's about to get up and speak. I'm sitting at a table with a water bottle in front of me, and guess who sits right next to me? Cheryl Batchelor. And I said, okay, Lord, I got it. And so I asked her in person that day, I said, may I interview you for a book for Christian to empower Christian businesswomen? Because when I interviewed her, and she said yes, and when I interviewed her later for the book, I asked her, I said, are you tired of being the only visible Christian businesswoman leader in the marketplace? And she looked at me and said, yes. So she's really been the only, even today, if you Google Christian businesswomen leaders, she's really still one of the only visible one who in her faith is very, external about it, and really, right?
It's interesting. We have a very large audience in the Middle East. We have many in the Muslim community that are watching this program in the secrecy of their home, who are living in an environment where women are subjugated, and it is a part of the culture.
Yes.
And it's been a part of our culture here in America for just a long time, but we look prettier at it. We look nicer. But it's time for that ceiling to be broken, because God is no respecter of persons. I'm talking about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And for those of you watching in the Middle East, in the Far East, and you're struggling to find a relationship with the God who created male and female in his image. And we're talking about the internal image of God. We're not talking about the external image of man. That this is something that's available to you. No matter what your imam tells you, no matter what you're being told by your government, no matter what you're being told by the propaganda outlets, you too can have this same relationship that's going to give you an opportunity of equal rights under heaven. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to continue our discussion with Caroline Mendez, author of Threads of Wisdom, Real-World Journeys to Leadership of Christian Women, Marketplace Leaders, and their best advice for glorifying God in your calling. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere, and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our one-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with my good friend Caroline Mendez, author of Threads of Wisdom, Real-World Journeys to Leadership of Christian Women, Marketplace Leaders, and Their Best Advice for Glorifying God in Your Calling. Caroline, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Eric.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Caroline, we talked and kind of alluded to the methodology that you used in approaching this, and you were consistent in all 10 interviews to use the exact same approach, the same questions, looking to see if you could find the thread that would connect from 10 different points. And,
that's right.
You know, when you connect the points of a compass, you have to triangulate. Okay, so 3 would establish a particular point. 10 would establish something that is more than a thread. If you find a consistent theme throughout, 10 points really confirms that, this is wisdom in leadership. So how did you approach these interviews? What was the methodology that you used?
So the methodology I used was I actually interviewed Christian businesswomen and asked them, what do you most want to know? If you could take a Christian businesswoman leader and sit her down and ask her, what would you want to ask her? And so I combined and distilled those questions into a couple of questions that I wanted each of them to answer. And so, for example, her thoughts on leadership. There's a section on her thoughts on leadership. The most powerful lessons that her mentors taught her. The ways that she learned leadership. How did that happen? What is her management approach? What is her personal management philosophy? Who influenced her leadership most? I specifically wanted to know, what are her faith at work practices? In other words, was she overtly Christian in leading, or was she covertly? How did she hire? Things like that. And then the 2 that are my favorite are, what does she want other Christian businesswomen to know? What's their best advice? And then what would she like to have known at the beginning of her career? So those are the questions that are answered by each woman.
When you asked those questions, did you self-reflect on how you applied these same principles or did not apply these same principles in your leadership roles?
Well, what's interesting, Eric, is that after I came to faith, I was self-employed. So for the past 18 years, even though I was born again 12 years ago, so for me, I was already out of corporate. But I was facilitating groups of these women, and it was my job really to push them and prod them and ask them these questions about, so what does it look like, you as a leader now, integrating your faith at work? Are you going to God? And asking him to be the CEO of your company. Is he the CEO of your company? And if he isn't, why isn't he? And so that was my job in the roundtables, was to, I wasn't on the hot seat, they were on the hot seat. It was my job to facilitate that for them and to really push and prod and question.
Of the 10 interviews that you did with leaders of companies from 4 to tens of thousands, pick one particular interview and kind of walk me through what made that interview outstanding to you.
There are so many good ones. I don't know if I could take you through exactly everything that I asked Janet Ward Black of Ward Black Law in the Carolinas, but I would love to tell you the story that most stood out to me that she said. In 2012, Janet Ward Black bought out her partners in her law practice, and it wasn't going well. Her profit was at 1%. She was driving one day to work, and the Lord said to her, "I am a substitutionary God." And she said, "What on earth are you talking about, Lord?" So she looked it up, she went online, she researched it, and she thought that what he meant was, you can tithe for all of your organization because you can be their tithing substitute. So instead of Janet Ward Black tithing her off of her income, she was to tithe off the gross income of the legal practice, which is, by the way, unheard of. I defy you to find anyone else in the country or the world that tithes off of the gross of their organization. This is very, very uncommon. And so she went to her CFO and she said, I know we're only making 1% profit, but we're going to start tithing 10% of the gross now. They formed a committee, an organization to actually choose nonprofits to give and tithe the 10% to. In a year, not only had they surpassed the 10% profit, but they actually made 10% on top of it. And her CFO came to her at the end of that year, after she had cut the check again for the 10% tithe, and after all the employees had gotten bonuses, and said, I was shocked when you asked me to tithe 10% of our gross, but as a CFO, I did it. She said, and now I want to be on the committee. I see what God did. And it was because of your faithfulness that it happened.
You know, it's interesting that you would say that. We tithe 10% of our ministry to Israel. Robert Morris built Gateway Church in Dallas, Texas, based on the principle that the first Sunday of every month, the entire offering would go to Israel from day one. The entire offering would go to Israel because of Genesis 12:3. I'll bless those that bless thee. I'll curse those that curse thee, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through thee. And he actually wrote a book about this concept of tithing to Israel, or donating one service a month to Israel, and the supernatural blessings that come from taking a position of being faithful with first fruits. Of course, Jesus rose on the Feast of First Fruits according to the biblical timeline, and so we know he is our first fruits, and we are to give our first fruits to the Lord. So as a ministry, it has always been my practice from the time that I founded Bethel here in Birmingham in 2007 to 11 years later now with the television ministry that we have around the world, that we tithe to Israel ministries that work in humanitarian aid centers, who work even in donating motorcycle ambulances, first responders. We support ministries that share the gospel exclusively, with the exception of the Red Cross equivalent there, where we try to raise enough money every couple of years to buy a first responder fully equipped motorcycle to donate. So we strongly believe in that principle. Well, you came out of this in chapter 11 of the book, really is the pinnacle of the story when you actually connect the dots of the findings. It's kind of the summation of what you were able to harvest from these incredible interviews. And I'd like you to step us through these threads of wisdom, and as you take each one, who they are, what they do, and how they do it is how you approached these principles. And walk me through this, kind of a highlight of the chapter, as we have about 18 minutes left in this segment. And I want you to do it justice, not because I want you to give the heart of the book away, but for women to feel empowered that they too can find out through the reading of these stories and the reading of these interviews and hearing of stories like Janet Ward Black, who made a decision first because she heard from God, meaning she had a personal relationship with God, which is the prerequisite to all of this, is that you must have a personal relationship with God through the shed blood of Jesus Christ, not because you think you can talk directly to him, but no one comes to the Father but through the Son. Not to the Son, but through the Son. It's all about God and God's plan of salvation. So take us to that chapter 11, the threads of wisdom, and what you were able to glean from this harvest.
So who they are, the first one is godly leader. And what that means is they know, not only, as you said, do they have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, but they understand that they are the steward of their organization. It's not theirs. They are stewarding it for God. And so God is actually the CEO of their organization. And they, instead of being in the driver's seat of a car, they are sitting in the passenger seat and Jesus is driving. So that's probably the first thing. They pray over everything. They pray in meetings. They listen to the Lord. They take their business list to the Lord. They will wait on the Lord, even if they think it's a good idea, or if they have not gotten the word, then they will hold and wait. So that's what a godly leader looks like in business. Number two, they're teachable. And I wouldn't say I was surprised by this, but every single one of these women had a mentor. What I was surprised about was that only 2 of the 10 women had women mentors. Everyone else was mentored by a man. And I think this is a deficiency in, and I'm hoping that I can give a plea out to those Christian businesswomen, women in leadership. Please, my sisters, will you consider mentoring another woman in business? Because the men are picking up our slack, and we are to be learning from other women, not from men specifically. So teachable, they pray for a mentor, they recognize the mentor. Some of the stories are very funny in that they had a prayer of asking for a mentor, and they showed up. The mentor showed up, and the woman didn't actually recognize he was actually the mentor that God had given her. But it's really about, am I able to receive input so that I can be more excellent at what I do in representing Christ? Number 3, they're humble. Boy, these women are humble. It's amazing, their resumes and the curriculum vitae and the things that the Lord has achieved through them. Yet, if you meet them, they are the most humble servant leader. They put their team first. They put the development of their team first. They are not dictators. They are collaborators, and they develop everybody else and their God-given gifts, and they make sure that they know what those are, and they encourage their team and their strengths, not their weaknesses. Number 4, they're self-led. I've gotten some flack on this one, so let me redefine this one. This means self-disciplined. So they're led by Christ, but they're self-disciplined. They know and understand their priorities. They know that God is first and family second, and then mission or work is third. But they live those values. They live those priorities. And so that's what I mean by self-led. They define how they spend their time and where they spend their time, knowing where the Lord would want them to be and what he would want them to do. Number 4 is courageous. These women take risks, and they take risks often at the Lord's leading. And they try new things, they take risks, they often fail, but they fail forward. And even if they're in fear, Eric, they still fear forward. They move forward regardless. Sometimes it's very big, and they're thinking, Lord, this is way bigger than what you and I talked about originally, but they move based on, and they move regardless of the fear. They are, what are we on, 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They are a listener. I cannot tell you how many lessons I've gotten on this myself. People think often that leaders are the ones with all the knowledge and wisdom, and they're the ones that we're supposed to listen to. True leaders actually listen more than they speak. Have you found that to be true as well?
I was just practicing listening.
And you were doing a great job of it.
Well, thank you very much. No, I absolutely agree. As a talk show host, we're here to bring and put the camera on you, not me. I'm just the facilitator of the interview and steering. It's driving Miss Caroline or driving Miss Daisy. The opinions of the talk show host is not what we're here for. We're here for the opinions of our guests. So that's what we do, and I agree. God gave you 2 ears and one mouth.
One mouth.
There you go.
So they listen to God first. They also listen to their peers. They listen to mentors, and they listen to their team members. They don't treat the team members like people who have no ideas or wisdom or information. They listen, and then they consider everything, taking it to the Lord, and then they assimilate that information, and they move forward based on that, in addition to facts and research. 7, they're values-based. They know their values, and they not only know them, but they live them. And their team members, the people in their organization, could actually tell you what their leaders' values are because they live them. They don't talk about them. They model and exemplify them. The 4 that I found most often represented in these 10 women were transparency, honesty, integrity, and authenticity. Number 7, maybe, lifelong learner. They are constantly learning. They have not reached a plateau where there is no more input. They are constantly and often in roundtables, executive roundtables, so that they can have peers speak into them and show them perhaps maybe blind spots that they have. They watch, they read, they listen. They are constantly, not only for themselves, but for their team members, they are investing in the development of their leadership and the leadership of their team members. The last one I think surprised me the most, which is they possess a deep self-knowledge. And I think this was very unexpected. And this is a point of when they hire and how they manage the organization, that they know themselves very well, and they know their strengths and they know their weaknesses. They do not try to shore up their weaknesses. They will hire their weaknesses. They will build on their strengths, and then everybody else who comes into the organization will have strengths that they do not. And they do assessments. They do spiritual gift assessments. They do DISC assessments, any assessments, strength finders. They will do not only for themselves, so that they know themselves well, they will do it for all of their team members so that they understand exactly what their team members are good at to put them in the right seat on the bus. And those are the 9.
Well, it's fascinating because as you're talking, Caroline, I'm thinking about the passage in Scripture that talks about that if a woman comes to faith and her husband is not yet a believer, this is not grounds for her to leave, but she should hang in there because she might be the one to lead him to the Lord, which absolutely, unequivocally establishes the leadership. He doesn't say if a man. He doesn't give us that example. If a man comes to faith and his wife isn't a believer, he specifically says if a woman comes to faith, a wife comes to faith, she's not to leave her husband, for she may be the very reason that he is led to the Lord. This is the mantle of leadership even in the home. And as I heard you talking about these principles, these are threads of wisdom for spouses, both husbands and wives, that this is a model, and it may have been written as a businesswoman's toolbox, a way for the transformation of female leadership in rising to positions in companies that have a faith-based model. I would expect companies like Chick-fil-A and Hobby Lobby and In-N-Out Burger and companies that have put themselves out there as faith-based companies to be seriously considering that the next generation of women leaders will be rising into the one family. Certainly, there are plenty of Kathy, from True Kathy's family, plenty of women in there, the same way that Walmart, the heir to Walmart, the heir to Heinz, the heir to many companies, but they weren't faith-based, rose to those positions. So we're seeing an increase in women leadership, but we're not seeing any emphasis on faith-based initiatives within companies that are women-led. Have you found in any of the discussions that there was resistance to this model? Because Chick-fil-A's model is full disclosure, even in the interview process, of who they are, what they are, and that they do have Bible studies, and they want believers to be hired. And as a private corporation, they have the right under law to hire who they want. It's not a discriminatory practice. It's a publicly known practice and well advertised. Have you come across any resistance? Are you seeing any kind of concern of women at the middle management level, at the senior in initiating faith-based initiatives or even small group discussions, or blending their faith into their management style?
I think it's getting better. I would say that I personally have not gone to Chick-fil-A and Hobby Lobby yet. I haven't been led to do that yet, to offer this leadership model. Let me tell you what the Lord is asking me to do. What he's asking me to do is to sow this model into 100 of the next generation Christian businesswomen leaders. And so I am to do that next. And so these women are going to come from all over the world. And I am to do that as a ministry, as a gift to the Lord. And so that's what I'm working on next. If he leads me to go to the bigger companies that are Christian and offer this, but right now I'm supposed to be sowing this into the next generation of Christian businesswomen leaders that he has chosen. And so I'm finding, I've got about 11 women out of the 100 that I believe he's kind of handpicking them, which is typically what he does with me. He doesn't put me I don't have a platform, Eric, I guess is what I'm saying. And I think there's a specific reason why I don't. So I have reached out to, he's asked me to reach out to Christian businesswomen organizations, of which there are a good many now, which is great. And I find that they read the book, they agree with the book, but for some reason they're not passionate about it as I am, or they don't see the value in having this knowledge sown into their members. And so I find that strange, but again, it's how God would have it be.
You know, what's interesting is as you're saying that, you know, they're looking for that ROI. They're looking for that, you know, what's the cost to benefit ratio. They're processing this faith-based initiative as if it were a business proposal or review of a contract. And I can hear the voices of them evaluating it from that particular aspect, as opposed to, if you want to change a person, you don't change their mind, you change their heart. And God says clearly that he'll replace that heart of stone with a heart of flesh. Actually, there's no biblical Hebrew word for brain, because it's as a man thinks in his heart. Every imagination of the heart. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so it's a very fascinating study in this concept. Caroline, is this a ministry? Do you have a 501c3? Is there a way to reach you on the web? Is there a way to support this ministry? Or is this an outcropping of something you're doing just through the church or individually?
No, I haven't found a church that that believes or supports what I'm doing. So the Lord's having me do it really just myself. I have a marketplace outreach. It's an LLC. It is not a 501c3 yet, because I find that to be a little daunting, and he hasn't led me to do that yet. But it is sowing this knowledge and wisdom into these 100 next generation women is free. Here's the catch. They have to be tithing actively 10% to their church in order to be one of the applicants. And if they are, then it costs them nothing. So that's the deal. They can reach me at ThreadWisdom, www.threadwisdom.com, and there's a contact us to apply to be one of the 100 women, and I would be thrilled to hear from them.
Well, I'm incredibly encouraged that you're doing this. We're talking with Caroline Mendez, author of Threads of Wisdom, Real-World Journeys to Leadership of Christian Women, Marketplace Leaders, and their best advice for glorifying God in their calling. She asked this question: what if you could interview top Christian women leaders and ask their advice on how to be successful, eternally significant, and glorify God with your work? This book documents the journey and best advice of 10 women that lead marketplace and nonprofit organizations in their own words. The 9 unique attributes that faithful women leaders all have in common, and ones you need to adopt in order to apply these biblically sound principles, not only for you personally, but for you professionally. And is this a guarantee for success? No. But what this is a guarantee for a perfecting of your walk with the one who brought you to this place, the one who paid the price for you to be able to share freely in a nation within the boundaries of the United States of America, free to share what it is that you believe, free to share and create a business model built around. If you have an entrepreneurial spirit, start out your business plan with a faith-based initiative as a part of your value system. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 is probably the most foundational principle you can apply. That's to trust in the Lord and lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your path straight. Who does not want a straight path to success, a straight path to prosperity, a straight path to finding that peace that passes all understanding, that even in the ups and downs of business cycles, that you have one that never changes, that you put your trust in. Caroline Mendez takes you on a journey in Threads of Wisdom in a way to embrace that, and how to be mentored and coached and be walked through this process with Caroline Mendez herself at threadsofwisdom.com. Caroline, it's great to catch up with you after such a long time, and I wish you nothing but incredible success with the book and with the mentoring program that you developed, and God bless you and your family, and thank you for being here with us on Revealing the Truth.
Thank you, Eric. God bless you.
Thank you so much. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.